Alright guys, so we are back in the car for another video, and today we are going to be comparing the ZF 8-speed to the 6-speed manual transmission when it's paired to the B58 engine. I finally have had an opportunity to spend a significant amount of time in both versions. I've had a manual transmission 440i for almost 6 years, and I've had this automatic transmission 340i for a little over a year. And so I just wanted to use this video to kind of detail what the differences are between the two. There are a lot of things that people probably don't realize without actually driving both cars back to back. So hopefully you guys find this video useful. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. Now, the first thing to understand, of course, is that I cannot tell you the perfect transmission for you. This is definitely something that's dependent on personal preference. You need to kind of determine what your priorities are with the car and how you plan on using the car. If it's only a weekend car, then it's going to be very different from a car that's designed for daily driver duties, or maybe you just want it to be flat out the fastest B58 out there. You know, all of those different details help determine which transmission is right for you. So if you're in the middle of trying to decide what transmission you want to go with or what's worth it for you from a buyer's perspective, hopefully you guys have at least seen this from my previous videos, right? Like, I don't want to just tell you this is what everybody should do. I want to give you some information so that you can kind of make that choice for yourself. So do some, thinking for yourself. Think about what you like and how you want to use your car, and that will help you determine which transmission you should go with. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is performance. And obviously the ZF 8-speed is going to be the better performing transmission in pretty much every scenario. It's going to have the fastest shifts between the two. There's no way you're ever going to be able to shift a 6-speed manual transmission as fast as the ZF can shift. And also it has the 8 gears. Those 8 gears make sure that the car can stay in a really tight power band compared to the 6-speed manual transmission, where it's going to be a lot harder to do that because you have less gears. You're going to do longer pulls in each gear, but that also can potentially make you lose a significant amount of boost, drop out of acceleration, and the automatic is just kind of a rocket, right? Once you start accelerating, it just bangs through the gears and keeps pulling as hard as possible. So it is what it is. That's something that we can't manually beat a computer, but it definitely is a significant reason why this transmission is considered the best of both worlds. Now, while the automatic transmission is faster objectively in a lot of cases, one thing I have noticed is that the manual transmission is much more eager to accelerate, and it just feels peppier from the driver's seat. I think one big reason for that is, if you guys have been paying attention, you'll notice that the manual transmission cars have a shorter rear end than the automatic transmission cars, and that just basically means that you're going to put more torque down to the road when you accelerate in a single gear without downshifting or anything like that. And so I think that's a big contributing factor to why this car feels like it's more fun. Another thing that I've noticed is that the throttle response is definitely different. And this is one of the first things, I guess, that I started noticing, where I see a lot of people complain about something. And of course, most of them have automatic transmission cars, and it just never made sense to me because it didn't bother me. But basically, I've come to the conclusion that sport throttle in an automatic transmission car is the same as comfort throttle in a manual transmission car. And I think, again, a lot of that has to do with trying to get efficiency out the car, the same way that they put a taller rear end so that the car can get better gas mileage. I think they also kind of numb down the throttle so that you don't have to worry about using extra gas every time you try to accelerate. Also, the sport throttle in an automatic car is pretty linear, and I think that's nice to have in the comfort setting in a manual transmission car, because when you're accelerating from a stop, trying to slip the clutch and manage that whole transaction to get going, it's really nice to have the extra control from the comfort throttle. The sport throttle is like artificially sensitive, and you touch it a little bit and it goes to like 50% acceleration. So Yeah, I mean, in an automatic car, I understand now. I also wish the car could start in sport mode and have that sport throttle all the time. That should kind of be the minimum for anybody that enjoys driving and wants, some kind of pep and performance behind the car. But in a manual car, the comfort throttle is great. I use it pretty much all the time. I don't use sport mode unless I'm actually like roll racing and I don't have to worry so much about throttle modulation. It's pretty much either wide open throttle or on the brakes. So now let's talk about strength. And again, the ZF8 Speed has a pretty significant advantage in most scenarios. If you're going to be running anywhere from 600 to 650 foot-pounds, you won't be able to argue that the 8-speed is going to be the stronger transmission. At most, you need an XHP flash, and that will allow you to put out the full amount of torque that the car is asking for without having any, electronics try to hold you back. So I definitely think that's the way to go if you're concerned about cost and just the strength of the transmission, especially if you're maxing out the stock turbo, because in a manual transmission car, you're going to have to upgrade your clutch. I put the 335IS OEM clutch in my car. It's probably the cheapest upgrade that you can make. It's around $350 to $400, and I did the service myself, but if you're paying for a clutch plus the service, it can easily be over $1,000, and that's kind of a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people when you're just trying to get to 450 or 500 foot-pounds of torque. Now, on the other hand, when you're going full send, most people with a manual transmission will go with a twin disc clutch that usually runs around $2,000 or so, plus maybe $1,000 to install, so you could say $3,000 all in. On an automatic transmission car, you will have a much larger investment. Most people end up going with the tried and true pure stage 2 transmission, and that can easily cost you in the 5 figures. That's a much bigger pill than I'm willing to swallow personally, but I understand a lot of people are looking for a certain level of performance, and that's just kind of a cost of playing the game. But, in a manual car, at least you don't have to spend that much to be able to put full torque down from a big turbo setup. Now, keep in mind, full send is kind of relative here. I think the fastest manual transmission cars are running like mid to low 6-second 60 to 130s. So there are much, much faster automatic transmission cars out there. But I think once we got those cars pushing a little harder and we understand if there are any other limitations like the gear sets and things like that, that I know a couple people have lost like either third or fourth gear. So when those upgrades become available, then maybe we'll have a better idea of what a true full send built manual transmission would end up costing. Next, let's talk about efficiency. And the ZF8 Speed is probably the most surprisingly efficient transmission I've ever driven. I really didn't expect it to be as significant of a shift compared to my manual transmission car, but it is definitely noticeable. I'm getting an extra 3 to 4 miles per gallon in this car, and again, a big reason for that is because it has so many gears. The car is basically going to get to 8th gear as quickly as possible, which means that, when you're cruising down the highway, or sometimes you haven't even left your neighborhood, it's already in 8th gear at 1300 RPM or whatever, trying to get the best gas mileage that you can. So it's a really nice feature in the transmission that it takes advantage of, especially if you put it in Eco Pro and maybe you're just trying to soak up the highway miles in your car. It's really easy to just get the best gas mileage possible. So highly recommended if you're focused on gas mileage. Now, even though overall efficiency, you would have to hand it over to the ZF8, another thing that I've learned after driving an automatic car is that the auto start stop is much more invasive and annoying in an automatic transmission car. And again, I saw a lot of people saying how badly they wanted to disable this, and it was, such just this dire need to let the car run when they're at idle, and I didn't really understand why. But the big difference here is that in an automatic transmission car, the auto start stop is engaged depending on your brakes. So when you're on the brakes and you slow down below a certain speed, the car is going to turn off. However, in a manual transmission car, you also have to push in the clutch and the car has to be in neutral. So if I'm coming up to a stop sign and I know I'm just going to stop for a second, kind of look both ways, and then accelerate, in an automatic car, the car is going to turn off, and then you get ready to accelerate and you wait for it to turn on, and it's just cumbersome, right? In a manual transmission car, if I keep my clutch foot pushed in and I keep the car in first gear, it never turns off. So I basically have like a secondary control that dictates when the auto start stop engages or disengages. If I'm coming to a stop and I know I'm going to be sitting there for a while, I can clutch out, put the car in neutral, let the car turn off, and save, you know, some of this fresh corn juice that I've got in the car, so it's not wasting away while I'm idling. And that's just a way I can get a little bit more efficiency out of the car without wasting gas when I don't need it. I've actually had it on in my manual transmission car for years. I just never turned it off because it never bothered me, and I figured saving a little bit of gas wasn't that much of a trade-off. So yeah, I mean, it depends on your preference. I know some people just turn it off because it's new and different, and so they don't like it, but for me, it just never really bothered me. Another thing we want to talk about is maintenance, and this is something that maybe, you know, is kind of an argument here, but the ZF transmission from BMW is designated as lifetime maintenance free. So they say the fluid in it and everything does not need to be maintained. However, I think most of us have seen that ZF's recommendation is usually somewhere between 60,000 and 100,000 miles that you should at least change the fluid. So that adds some extra maintenance to the car, and it's a good recommendation because the fluid does a lot in an automatic. You're going to be using it to basically create your clutch pressure, it's shifting your gears, doing everything for you, and it's experiencing a significant amount of heat, which is why, you know, your car has an integrated transmission cooler. But because all of that can degrade the oil over time, it's probably a good idea to replace it. And that is an additional cost. You know, it kind of just is what it is. But I think, you know, $200 every 60,000 miles isn't that big of a deal. Now, on the other hand, in a manual car, you're very easily going to go beyond the expense of doing an intermittent transmission service, because if you have to replace your clutch, again, it's probably going to cost you over $1,000. Now, the good news is a lot of people are able to make their stock clutch last for a while if they do stay low on power, and that's always the goal, to make the stock clutch last as long as possible. So it's not guaranteed that you're going to have to do this at 100,000 miles or whatever, but if you do wear it out, you know, excessive slippage or whatever, especially if you wear out your flywheel, those are extremely expensive. Those dual mass flywheels suck, and I know a lot of people just switch to an aftermarket clutch to get rid of them and save a little bit of money at the same time. But yeah, it's something that if you do have to do maintenance on your manual transmission car, it definitely can be more expensive than the automatic. Now, I know generally speaking we say that the ZF8 is the transmission that's good at everything, but the manual transmission does have a couple tricks up its sleeve. For example, that's right, folks. You just saw me reverse the car with the door open, and it didn't slam the car into park and make the transmission sound like it was going to shatter into a million pieces or just snap something off. And I mean, this kind of reinforces one of the big things that I do like about the manual transmission. You're basically able to do whatever you want when you want to do it. Of course, there's a drawback there, because if you have any sort of driver error, you can very much damage things very quickly. But, you know, sometimes you see people on the forums like, oh, my car doesn't have a battery or it doesn't have power. How do I put it in neutral? And you got to like get under the car and tickle its pickle and make it do something that frankly it wasn't designed to do, right? I mean, most of what we're doing isn't what these cars were built for. So this is definitely a transmission that's set up to be electronically controlled and just kind of drive and make your driving experience comfortable. In the manual car, you can do whatever you want. You can put the car in neutral whenever you want. I've rolled my car around my garage without even turning it on. Super easy, you know, to get access to the attic or whatever I need to do. It's just really nice and convenient to know that I don't have any electronics or sensors or nannies limiting what I can do with this transmission. So just something to think about. I mean, it's kind of is what it is. There are of course drawbacks, because like I said, if you miss a shift or do something that it's not designed for, you're going to have a bad time. But in most scenarios, you know, driving carefully and just kind of, you know, engaging with the transmission, it's a very, very nice experience. So other than that, you know, I mean, I really just feel like the ZF 8-speed is great at everything. It does great performance numbers. It's great for comfort, great for efficiency. But if you're focused on fun and you're like me, you're just dedicated to moving all your arms and legs every time you're driving the car, nothing can beat a manual transmission. And that's why the manual is the preference for me. That's why I still enjoy it in my 440i. I don't regret it a single day. Every time I drive that car, it feels special and it feels like an event. In this car, it's a lot easier just to drive in it and kind of let my mind go numb. I don't really have to think a lot or focus on a lot of stuff inside of the car. I'm really just going to my destination and riding along the way. I know I'm kind of hard-headed when it comes to stuff like this because I just love manual transmissions, and I know a lot of people complain about the BMW transmissions compared to JDM cars or American cars or whatever, but for me it works great. It's a lot of fun, it's really engaging, and it performs good enough. You know, there's always going to be a car that's faster, but if I'm going to sacrifice anything, I want to make sure that I'm at least having as much fun as possible, and that's kind of how I choose the setup for my car. So yeah, hopefully again this gives you a little bit of insight, maybe something that you didn't realize before. A lot of details about the manual are obscured because most people don't own both, so I know all people say is the automatic's fast, the manual's fun, but maybe this gives you some more detail on why that actually is and what you would experience if you drove them back to back. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.